All right. Hello, everybody. Let me start this up here and move this over. I want to welcome everybody to the November 2017 monthly 3D printing and 3D design webinar. My name is Nick Klosky, and I am a co-founder of Honeypoint 3D. I want to also thank everybody for being patient for all of the kind of webinar troubles we've been having. We're trying a new system this month, and hopefully this works. I wanted to go into a couple of questions that we received this month on Meshmixer, specifically some workflows on how to work with complex models where you might not be able to see all of the model that you're working on, as well as ways of meshing different parts of models together to accomplish something without necessarily using all just sculpting tools. So I will explain that when we get into it. First, I want to switch here. I am using a model from Thingiverse. This is a Roman marble plinth 3D scan, as you can see. On Thingiverse, I make my window a little bit larger. You can see this is from Thingiverse, Thing 757600. It's a very cool 3D scan used, created by photogrammetry, so with a cell phone. And let me go back over here. So the first question I wanted to help answer, if we zoom out here, is about how to work with objects when you can't necessarily see what you're working on. So this is an example of two of these plinths in Meshmixer. If I open the object browser here, you can see we have just one object. It's not two separate models, even though they're colored differently, but those are just base groups. These are essentially just one model, and this would be as if you had a complex model where you had kind of an interior side inside of here that you wanted to work on, but it was being occluded by something else. Our first tip is how to actually do that. So let's say you wanted to work, I'm going to press the C key to recenter, on this area right down here. You didn't really want to affect this side of your model, but you only wanted to work right down inside of here. If you hit something like a sculpt tool with a draw, you can see that even if I get my manipulator or my cursor pretty small, we're affecting the other side of the model. So there are some tools to help you not do that, as well as to switching to surface brushes, which you can do. But I want to show you the way that I frequently do it. So you can see that I am on a surface brush here, and it is kind of working. But here's a really nice thing to do. If you can select the area that you want, I'm going to press the S key for select, and I'm going to select, this area. I can hold down the Control key and right click, or actually hold down the right mouse button and drag to expand my selection. Essentially, somehow get the area that you want to manipulate selected. It might take a little bit of work to get everything selected that you would want to work on. And you want to select maybe a little bit more than what you want, like that. What you can do is now press the Y key, or if you go up to Edit and you go to Separate, that is the Y key, like that. Now you see that we have two objects in the object browser. If you don't see the object browser down here, you go to View, and it should be either Show or Hide Object Browser right there. The Y command essentially separated that selection into a different object. We can go to this little eyeball in the lower right and click that eyeball on your original object to turn it off. And now you have just this object to go work on. You can do whatever you want on it. You can put, stamps on it. You can do, whatever you need to do on this. Maybe pop that out a tiny bit. Maybe that's kind of what we wanted to do. And I can even hit that with some smoothing tools and all of that. and smooth it down. Now, one of the tricks to this, to make it more easy, which I might have just, no I didn't, is not to affect the edges of this. It'll make it a lot easier bringing this back in later. What you can do when you go into refinement and filters, you can say fixed boundary, and now you see that even if I hit with the smoothing tool on this boundary, I'll go into wireframe, it tries to not affect the boundary. You could see that it affected it a little bit, but the boundary is still there as I kind of move over it, so that's pretty cool. If you click right on the boundary, you will affect it, but then the rest of the boundary will be okay. So this is a really good thing to go into filters and say fixed boundary, just to make sure that your boundary is not affected, and I'll tell you why. So once you've made all of your changes here, you can turn the eyeball back on, kind of zoom out a little bit, and you can see that your object is still there, and it matches those edges precisely. If you shift click on both of these objects and combine them back into one object, you can see that some face groups were created down there. But these are still, if we go into wireframe mode, these are still disconnected. If I hit select, you can see that my cursor is not selecting on the other side of that break because it's actually a break. Now here's the thing with the latest versions of Meshmixer, they don't really show the boundaries by default. You have to go up to View and Show Boundaries, and now you'll see that there is a blue boundary around the outside. Very easy way to fix this is to go into Edit to Close Cracks. And after a minute of thinking, the blue boundary is gone and your object is now completely merged. So that is one really nice way if you need to work on very, very tight areas, is to select it, separate it, do your work, and then bring it back in. So that's a pretty cool little technique that I use quite a bit. I want to also show you another technique. I get a lot of questions saying something to the effect of, I want to put a ball or something on the top of this object. What is the best way to do it? Or actually a better thing is, I want to put a ball between these two objects. What is the easiest way to do that? Now you certainly can go into something like Meshmix, select a ball, drop it in midair, and start doing some placing from different angles like this, and then scale it down, and then move it over, right? So that takes a little bit of time to do. I'm going to show you an easier way. Undo all those ball moves. This is a way that I don't use quite as much as actually I use it a lot more now than I did because I keep forgetting that it's there, but it's actually a really powerful feature. It's called the fit primitive. If you want to put a ball right on the center of this, you can make a selection where you want your ball to go, something like that, and you go Edit to Fit Primitive. And you can have a primitive type of a square, cylinder, something like that. Sphere from plane, sphere best fit. So sphere best fit puts it right on top. Sphere from plane says, wherever you selected, that will be the bisecting sphere for the plane. And that puts it right on that selection, which is really, really awesome. Now, a lot of people also say, what if I want to create a bridge between these two things, just to kind of sculpt from? That's also a really easy way to do with Fit Primitive. You make a selection here, you make a selection here, you go Edit to Fit Primitive, and you see that there's two selections that are two planes that have been created kind of at different angles, and that was based on the selection. You see this selection, I kind of turn the corner here, so it bases it off of the entire selection. But if you say single primitive up in the top left here, it will create a single primitive between those two selections. And now I can scale the primitive all I want, so I can kind of move it. I'm going to be perfectly, not perfectly, but pretty darn aligned to those planes. Kind of like that. And then say, and I can say create new objects if I want. I'm not going to do that right now, and say accept. So what I've created is a plane between those two, perfectly flat. Turn on wireframe, you see it's very organized. This gets us to the third tip that I wanted to share about how to actually connect those two things together. Now, I can try to Boolean these if they overlap, but a lot of times Boolean works great when you have manifold objects. So objects with perfect fitness, no holes in it, all sorts of things like that. But when you're working with certainly something like this, like a flat plane, the results can be unpredictable. And also, even if you have a full object, you can sometimes run into problems if that object has holes in certain places, like even far away from where you're running the Boolean. Sometimes that can affect it and give you what's called like a red effect. So when you try to do a Boolean, your model turns red and it can't figure it out. So this is a very good way to show you how to kind of bridge these things with a primitive. I put a primitive in here, and I'm going to select, and I'm just going to select kind of a line here that's going to match this side of the plane. And that's not the best selection, so the way that I would make the best selection is I would hit the B key, B for boundary, smooth boundary. So that makes a nice kind of smooth boundary right there, and then hit delete. All right, looks pretty good. I'm going to use this trailing edge here. So center this a little bit, zoom in. I'm going to select right here, and we'll see if this works. These meshes are of a little bit different density, but we'll see. And then go up to Edit, to Bridge. And you see that it actually created a bridge with the normals that are not facing the correct direction. But that's all right. We can actually fix that a little bit later. The way to actually fix that now is make the selection a little bit more nice. So I can select here and select here, and then hit Control B for bridge. And it still actually did that. It made the selection go the other way because I guess it doesn't really know which way to go. We have the normals facing out this way, but then the normals facing up this way. So we can fix that later. We actually don't. Actually, this would make sense. That I'm going to undo that. It wouldn't actually make sense for the normals to be facing up for this. So what I'm going to do is select a little bit on here, hit E for expand to connected, then go to edit and say flip normals. So now the normals are facing down. This actually would make sense because this wall would come up and turn the corner. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to select on that edge and select on this edge and hit Control B. And we get a bridge. So I can do that here, and then I can do that on the other side and then fill in this hole, or we can use one of my favorite tools, which is something like a robust smooth tool underneath sculpt, brushes, robust smooth. And then with the refinement, make sure that refinement is turned on, refinement and reduction are on. And what we do with this, as I kind of move over here, you can kind of see, is as I click and drag, I'm actually going to be closing this up. Let me do this. Not entirely sure why that is not working. You may not actually know how to fully do that. Usually that works. I'll have to figure out why that's not working. But we can actually go back to the way that might be a little bit more consistent. I'm going to go back to the other side and do the same thing. I'm going to select right here. Select right here. Hit Control B for bridge. Now we have a nice hole in the middle. We just double click on this hole and type F or edit to erase and fill. And there's different fill options. I did a little flat remeshed like that. And we have a nice little edge right here. You can now go back in and hit something like the Robust Smooth tool to kind of smooth that edge out if you wanted, like that. You know, as you would want it. Oh, okay, now I figured out why that's happening. I'm not able to affect the boundaries right here because I forgot to turn off fixed boundary. Now that will work. And we can actually do this for the other side as well. And actually, let me show you how to do this. So I'm going to actually just undo all of the things that I just did. And now you see, and let me actually delete this, you see that we have a really kind of nasty hole right here. And a very nice tool if you have nasty holes or things like that is the Robust Smooth tool. So you go to Sculpt, to Brushes, to Robust Smooth, and you make sure that Refinement and Reduction are turned up. And again, I made that mistake. I had Boundary turned on, but usually won't have that turned on. And then literally, you just make your brush kind of as big to encompass both sides of the side of the hole, and you just click, and it kind of just zippers up. And you see that this is overflowing here on the side. It really doesn't matter. It will bring that side back in. Over time, it might take a little time to do it, or you make your brush a little bit bigger. And then you just kind of click and drag and kind of move back and forth. And it zippers that thing up. Now, a lot of times it will not create maybe the best thing because it does have to do some computation right here. You see that that's kind of not the best. It's actually pretty good for zippering that up, but it was a lot better than it was before. And you can go back in and delete just that problem area if you want, like that, and then use the tool again, or fill it, or do whatever you need to do. Then hit it again, maybe with a smoothing tool to kind of fill that out. And I guess we have a little hole right here. I can fill that in. And a lot of times the Robust Smooth tool will maybe look like it filled in holes, but it may not have totally done it. So let's see if we go to Analysis, to Inspector. Yeah, so this hole down here looked like it filled in, but it has a tiny little hole in it. But if we go to Analysis, to Inspector, and then click on this little balloon, now the hole is gone, and you have a manifold model. Kind of come back here. So I hope that helps explain some things that we had actually a couple of people this month ask about how to work in very tight spaces inside of your model, as well as how to use some tools to make very mechanical bridges or mechanical shapes into your model using fit primitive. Instead of trying to kind of align a drag and drop Meshmix model in, the fit primitive is an awesome tool. I'm looking over here for the people that are online. I don't have any questions. I put out a little request for questions at the beginning of this, and I don't see any. So I think that for this month, it'll just kind of be a short webinar, a nice 20-minute one that gives you some tips on Meshmixer. And as always, if you have any questions for the webinars, please let me know. You can email me at nick@honeypoint3d.com. And I really appreciate everybody who watches live, as well as the people who watch on replay. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a great November. Bye-bye.
You're the only person in the conference.